Hello, everyone. Happy Sunday. I hope everyone's doing well. I'm wishing everybody a peaceful day and a wonderful weekend. I've been walking through teachings on the six perfections, also known as the six paramitas. And so today is, I believe, the third session. What's up, Bobby? Nice to see you, bro. Today's my third session on the third paramita of patience. The first paramita is generosity. The second paramita is ethical discipline. The third paramita is patience. Again, paramita is a Sanskrit word for perfections. So these six perfections make up the whole entire Buddhist path, going from where we are now with all of our various afflictions and emotional hangups, all the way up to full enlightenment or perfect Buddhahood. So patience is very powerful and it's a great topic. And people have written full books on just the paramita of patience. There are three types of patience. So far in the first two sessions, I really covered the first type of patience, which is remaining calm in the face of your attackers. And you could take this as verbal or physical attackers. The second type of patience is accepting suffering, which is what we will focus on today. The third type of patience is to gain assurance in the Dharma being teachings of the Buddha. So the second type of patience is accepting suffering, and I have some quotes I'd like to share. So the way I look at patience is, by and large, the Buddha and all of these wonderful masters were very kind and compassionate and loving, and they teach this stuff to help us. They teach this with a sincere heart and a genuine wish for our happiness, and that's really quite prolific. And so, the way that my understanding of these teachings on patience is that they're telling us, let go. And that's easier said than done. Let go is a great message, but it's not easy to do. Okay. So the first quote that I have is from Pabolka Rinpoche, has a book called Liberation in the Palm of Your Hand, which is very powerful, a very powerful teaching on the whole entire path to Buddhahood. He says, not only should you be unattached to happiness, but you should also regard suffering as a form of adornment and use it as a medicine. As in the preceding section on the mind training practices, whenever you are beset by suffering while enduring ascetic practices for the sake of the Dharma, when sick, when beset by unasked for enemies, or even when suffering in a nightmare, turn them all into things that will help your Dharma practice. Think about how they will use up evil karma, increase thereby your love and compassion for others. Think about the faults of samsara and so on. Be patient. Now, there's a lot there. So, just to unpack this, in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition, there's a bunch of teachings on taking whatever comes in front of us in our experience and transforming that experience into something that will benefit us and benefit others. Buddhist teachings are rooted. The very foundation of Buddhism is karma, which is hello, Simu. Thank you for joining me. Namo Buddha. So the Buddhist teachings are based on karma, which is cause and effect. Anything we think, say, or do will become a cause for a future effect. Okay. So what Paboka Rinpoche is saying when he says not only should you be unattached to happiness, but you should also regard suffering as a form of adornment and use it as medicine, he's actually suggesting that we take suffering and we use it to reduce our negative karma by purifying it. See, all of the suffering that we experience in this lifetime is a result. It's nothing but a result of previous karma that we've already created. So we've created these causes in either lifetime or a previous lifetime. And now the effects of those causes are arising. So when we experience suffering, it's our karma. So if you take that suffering and you look at it in a positive light, you could say, this is actually perfect because I can purify this negative karma right now. I don't need to wait until later to purify the karma. I don't need to wait until next week or 10 years from now or next life. I can purify my negative karma right now. And in a lot of ways, that's very beneficial. So Pabonka Rinpoche is suggesting that we take suffering and we look at it as an adornment and we use it to purify our negative karma. By the way, if we use the right tactics, we can take suffering and we can use it to also cultivate positive karma right now. And I'll talk about that a little bit. So, next quote from Pabonka Rinpoche is, when you undergo difficulties for the sake of Dharma, think good. This replaces much suffering in the lower realms. So again, he's saying that if we're practicing spiritual practices like the Dharma, and we're suffering, we're uncomfortable. Maybe you're meditating and your back hurts, which we've all experienced. You can think of this as purification of karma, and therefore you're not going to be reborn in a lower realm. Okay. Or you could, don't yet understand reincarnation. You could say, I'm purifying negative karma that would make me unhappy next week by accepting it right now. Okay. Thing that Pabonka says is, at such a time recall the good qualities of suffering. Engaging in the deeds of bodhisattvas tells us the good quality of suffering is that it removes arrogance and sorrow. So we're removing our arrogance. One develops compassion for beings in samsara, avoids sin, and rejoices in virtue. So here he's saying that suffering is actually positive. So one of the amazing teachings of Buddhism, specifically Tibetan Buddhism, is they teach that suffering is something that actually, I'm sorry, yeah, our own suffering is something that brings us closer to reducing our arrogant state, reducing our ability to have compassion for others. When we suffer, it's a reminder that other sentient beings are suffering with the same thing. So not only can suffering bring down our arrogance and our egotistical, self-grasping, but it can also help us to be more loving and more compassionate. If we're suffering, maybe we're sick, or maybe things aren't going well in our life, then you better believe there are other people suffering as well. And if we connect our own suffering to the suffering of others, and we remember them and we think about their suffering with love and compassion, that actually creates positive karma. So you're reducing and purifying negative karma, and then you're letting the flower of positive karma open up so that you can bring happiness to yourself and others. It's very, very full and intelligent. It's a very smart way to live your life. Furthermore, you must accept suffering and cultivate a state in which you will increase your wholesome activities, do things like practicing contentment and having few wants. So again, really, they're giving us these intelligent ways to take suffering and manage it in a very patient manner, right? So I talked about this in my first two sessions. That, excuse me, sorry, I talked about this in my first two sessions. When we have patience, it makes us very, very powerful and very strong, and it kind of makes us like a mountain. When a big rock mountain hides and sits there, it doesn't matter what kind of weather comes, the strongest snowstorm or the worst wind, a horrible thunderstorm, all of these things cannot damage the mountain that just sits there with its power and its stability. And if we have patience, we become like a mountain. We become a individual who, no matter what happens in our lives, we don't become paralyzed, dejected, sad, depressed, because we're so patient. And that patience gives us a power and an ability to endure with any scenario. Okay. Now, I'd like to quote a different. There is a master called Sir Lingpa. So the Tibetans call Sir Lingpa, uh, what's the name of the island? Sir Lingpa was from a island in Indonesia, and I'm having a brain lapse. I forget the name of the island, but the Tibetans call him uh, kind of a moniker related to the island he's from, and it will come to me anyway. Uh, is Master Atisha's teacher. So Master Atisha was this Indian master, and he traveled to faraway island, and essentially what he learned from Sri Lingpa was a deep uh, on bodhicitta, which is the wish to become a Buddha in order to benefit all sentient beings. So Sri Lingpa has some really powerful teachings, and I'm going to quote a verse from a text uh, Sri Lingpa called "How Leveling Out the Conceptions." Actually, let me just tell you the correct name. This is called "Leveling Out All Conceptions." So this is a teaching for Lingpa, and then it has some commentary, some verses that comment on the teaching by Atisha. Atisha brought Buddhism to Tibet. Uh, Essentially, he kind of restored Buddhism. Buddhism had kind of gone off the path, and I believe Tibet's king requested Atisha to come. He gave him a bunch of gold and so forth. Atisha went to Tibet and he shared these teachings. So, in leveling out all conceptions, adverse conditions are your spiritual teacher. Demons and possessor spirits, the Buddha's emanations. Sickness is a broom for negative karma and defilements, and sufferings are the Dharmadhatu's ultimate reality's expanse. Now, a type of teaching from what's called Lojong, which is it's Tibetan mind training. Lojong is this really powerful way to take whatever comes up in your life, no matter how difficult it is, and convert it into an immediate path to an. So here, what Sir Lin is saying is that no matter what happens to us, no matter how bad it is, no matter how difficult it is, there's a way to make it positive. And in a way, when I shared this genre of teachings with one student several years ago, a guy named Logan, um, response was, "This makes you completely bulletproof. This makes you, these teachings make you so that no matter what happens in your life, that you're basically immune to all the difficulties in your life." So they're very beautiful teachings. So what Sir in that last verse, I'm going to share some commentary from Tisha about what he meant. He says, even if unwanted adverse conditions, such as sickness and suffering, befall you, turn these into catalysts and take on top of these the sickness and suffering of all sentient beings. Now, this is where we start to get into the Lojong teachings. Um, Contains within it something called Tong Len. Tong, I'm bad with Tibetan, I forget. I believe Tong is giving and Len is taking, or I might be reversing the two. But anyway, giving and taking is what Tong Len symbolizes. You give away all of your body, wealth, good karma, all of your material belongings. You give away everything, and it's a visualization exercise. So we visualize ourselves giving everything to all sentient beings. And then when we take, we visualize ourselves taking all the suffering away from sentient beings and bringing it right into our heart. And we imagine them being free of their pain and their suffering. So in this verse, saying, even if unwarranted adverse conditions such as sickness and suffering befall you, turn these into catalysts and then take on top of them the sickness and suffering of all sentient beings. So, for example, let's say we're sick. Let's say we get sick and we have a cold or some kind of virus. The normal reaction to being sick is, oh, you get kind of mad and you're sad and you're like, oh, I feel horrible. I want this to end. But what Sir Lingpa and Atisha are telling us is don't look at it that way. Think, oh, I'm sick. This is wonderful. It's a chance to purify my own negative karma. The reason I'm sick is because I created the causes for this sickness. And now this sickness is the arising of the causes. It's the effect of the causes already created. So now what he's saying is take on top of your own sickness, the sickness of all living beings. Now imagine this, right? Here I am, I'm feeling sick. One route, which is the normal human response, is to have self-grasping and self-cherishing and think, poor me. But Sir Link and Atisha are teaching us this other way. By the way, the Tibetans call Sri Lingpa the Sumatran. He was from the island of Sumatra in Indonesia. So they call him the Sumatran. And so that's what I couldn't remember earlier. Of course, it came to me. So now what he's saying is if unwanted adverse conditions such as sickness and suffering befall you, turn them into catalysts and take on top of them the sickness and suffering of all sentient beings. That is compassion. So let's say any negative event happens that you don't like. It could be sickness. It could be somebody said something hurtful. You could have a problem with your work. You could have a problem with your spouse, your sibling, any problem you have. Look at it and let's say it comes up. And let's just use the example of sickness because most of us have been sick. You're feeling kind of sick. And instead of getting sad and depressed about it, think, wonderful. I'm feeling sick right now. And there are hundreds of millions, there are billions and trillions, there are infinite other sentient beings right now here on Earth and in other earthly worlds that are sick. And then visualize all of their sickness comes into your body on top of your own sickness. And it starts to dissolve your own ego. So in essence, what this patience does is if we cultivate this really strong patience, there are these techniques where we can make our patience stronger and stronger. And instead of getting upset about our suffering, we can say, this is good, I'm suffering. Now I can take the suffering of all other beings on top of my suffering. Further in the commentary, Atisha says, take these on mentally without reservation. That's what I just said. Take all the suffering of all these beings onto yourself on top of your suffering. So take these on mentally without reservation and rejoice for having taken them en masse. Similarly, as you give to sentient beings, whatever favorable conditions you enjoy, such as your happiness, rejoice in sentient beings perfecting their accumulations of merit. Likewise, if you probe any conditions for the sight, sound, smell, taste, and so on that arise, they are nowhere to be found. Place your mind in this truth of unfindability and rejoice in adverse conditions with the thought, they are my spiritual teachers exhorting me to the ultimate expanse. They are conditions conducive to enlightenment. Now, this is getting into deeper Buddhist philosophy of the nature of reality, and on all phenomena are devoid of intrinsic existence. So he's pointing us to that. If you've received teachings on the wisdom teachings of Dzogchen Mahamudra, Prasangika Madhyamaka, or any of the teachings, then this will make sense. If not, this make a lot of sense. I'll give you a taste of uh, reality on the ultimate level. He's saying that if you search for the suffering and you try to find its nature, its intrinsic nature or its essence, you cannot find it. Here's a simple way to understand this: is you think about dependent origination. For example, if I have burn or acid reflux, right? You could think that that acid reflux it has an essence or a dependent existence. But in reality, it's a result of causal factors. Anything that arises in our life is merely an effect of a previous cause. And while it's an effect of a previous cause, it's also most likely a cause for a future effect. And then that future effect will be a cause for a future effect. Unless and until we learn to purify these things that are arising, they all are going to not only be the manifestation or the effect of previous karma causes, karmic causal effect, but also if we cling to these things, they're going to become a cause for a future effect. And then you just further your samsaric suffering. So, what these teachings do is they teach us how to understand all of these things that are arising for us. Sorry, excuse me. All of these things that are arising are just effects of previous causes. They have no self nature, they have no essence. In other words, they are not independent. So whenever we're suffering, that suffering itself, it seems real. It seems to have its own nature, but it doesn't have an independent nature because it is merely an effect of a previous cause. And just as the cause of that effect was impermanent, the effect is also impermanent. And in in the very near future, it's going to dissolve, disintegrate, and disappear, and it will be scattered to the four corners of the earth by winds and so forth. So it doesn't have the solid concrete appearance that it seems to have. Or I'm sorry, it doesn't have a solid concrete existence that it appears to have. So whatever suffering we experience, if you search for its essence, which is to say, can you find solidity, concrete, permanent nature, any independent nature? Can you find any suffering that exists independently? The answer is no, because if anything anywhere in the world existed independently, and it would have no cause and it would have no ending, it would never end. It would be perpetual, it would exist forever. And nothing exists like that. Everything arises and falls, arises and falls. Okay. The next commentary from Atisha is when you are suffering from an illness, take all the sickness and pains of every sentient being into the core of your heart and imagine that all sentient beings attain perfect abandonment. Thinking this has served its purpose, cultivate joy. When you are free of sickness, again motivated thus, give to all sentient beings all your happiness and its causes, and imagine that all sentient beings attain perfect realization. Thinking this has served its purpose, cultivate joy. This sweeps away negative karma and the obscurations, for it does not allow negative karma and obscurations to linger unchallenged for even a single moment. If 100 sufferings arise, 100 ways to search for their true nature will emerge. However, given that these sufferings never truly existed, there are 100 different ways to not find them. These are therefore the 100 abandonments and the 100 realizations. A great display of the ultimate expanse. Cultivate joy in these. So essentially, he's kind of pointing to what I just talked about, which is that when we experience difficult situations, it seems like they really exist. When we have any type of problem, whether it's with another person, or maybe we don't feel well, or maybe we don't have enough money, or maybe our job's going bad, or our husband or wife is mean to us, or your kids aren't good, or you lose the death of a loved one, no matter what it is, or your government creates laws that you don't like. I know right now there's a great deal of uh, because of the constant changes in the American uh, government, the economy, just everything. There's so much change. Some people are really happy with the changes, some people aren't. The fact that you have one group that's happy with the changes and another group that's very dissatisfied with the changes, it points to the fact that those changes have no intrinsic goodness or badness. That might make some of you angry with me because you might think, oh, Jason's tone deaf, or he's minimizing. Jason is dismissing the suffering that's going on. It's not that. You have to look at the true nature. If something exists, and then you have one group of people that love it and one group of people that hate it, that is proof that it has no inherent existence. It has no inherent goodness or badness. So that's really what this comes down to. So, and Atisha are really giving us these very, very powerful teachings because they want us to utilize the suffering that arises in our lives in a positive way. So instead of getting sad and mad and upset with all of these things going on in our lives, immediately anything bad that happens, anything that you have a hard time with, think to yourself, I'm not accepting this. I'm going to take this negativity into my heart, and then I'm going to imagine all living beings and all of their suffering, whether it's poverty or sickness or sadness or anger or jealousy or attachment, what beings are suffering with. I know I'm suffering right now, and I know there are infinite other beings suffering. I'm going to take that onto myself and visualize that I'm extracting the suffering from them. It's coming into my heart. And then when it does, I feel intense joy for having removed the suffering for so many beings, which is something that's perhaps the most meaningful thing we can do. Compassion and love are perhaps the most meaningful things we can do in our lives because most of us are so selfish and we have so much self grasping and self cherishing. From morning to night, we just think about me, me, me. What can I eat today? What can I watch on Netflix? By the way, I'm no different. I'm very selfish. I have a great deal of selfishness and self-grasping and self-cherishing. I'm no different than anybody. I live with my own self-grasping and I see it all day long thinking, hey, what can I get for me? As if there's really an inherent me. There is no inherent me. If you search your whole entire body for me, you can't find it. Does the me live in the head? Is it in the eyes, the nose, the ears, the mouth, the tongue? Is the me the beard? Are all these little beard hairs me? If all of these little beard hairs are me, let's say I have 1,000 hairs on my face. I don't know if that's right, but let's just assume I did. If I had 1,000 hairs on my face and every one of these hairs was me, then there would be 1,000 me's. If there was an inherently existent me, then since I have all of these different parts of my body, that would mean I would have multiple me's. And so this is prasangika madhyamaka refutation of inherent existence. So I don't want to get too far into that, but the point is we have a lot of delusional projections. Basically, what we're doing is our mind is projecting a reality and creating a reality. All of the phenomenal world that surrounds us appears to exist independently, inherently, and intrinsically, which is to say, it appears in our mind's eye, it appears as if everything that exists is an independent, autonomous phenomena. But that's not how anything exists. Everything that exists is actually, it's like a mental conceptual picture. There's a mental conceptual picture in our minds that reflects. Actually, there's a mental conceptual picture, and then there's a referent to that picture, or that you could say a mental thought or a mental conceptual picture in the mind. And then everything that exists in the mind has a referent. A referent is just the object of a thought. So when you think of a pink elephant, then there's the thought, and then the referent of that thought is this supposedly this supposedly pink elephant. The conceptual picture is different than the object that that it represents, right? So if you have a conceptual picture of a table, the object that mental picture represents is different than the concept. And that's I'm going way too far into the philosophy, but the point is we're projecting our reality. And so these Lojong teachings, they're using emptiness. Emptiness allows everything to function. Impermanence allows everything to arise and fall. So these teachings understand that we have the ability to use our mind and our intellect to attack the suffering. So whenever these negative things in our life arise, we can use lojong. You can lojong it if I make it a verb. You can lojong it, and then it becomes a cause for positive karma. It becomes a cause towards your enlightenment, towards your Buddhahood. And if you don't lojong it, you don't use some kind of antidote, then that negativity event is going to cause more negative karma for us. And the more negative karma we create, the more likelihood we have of going astray, going away from the path towards enlightenment. I think that's enough for today. Enough of ranting and idea how long I went, but it was too long. So now in Buddhism, we always dedicate the merit. So dedicating the merit is saying, I acknowledge that I've done something positive today. By the way, any of you that were part of this, listening to this teaching, you also did something positive. So you should dedicate the merit. So I did something positive today, and all the Bodhisattvas before me have used the dedication of merit as a way to preserve their positive karma and positive merit so that if they get angry later, it doesn't destroy the merit. So that's why we dedicate the merit. As a result of being in this Dharma practice, I dedicate whatever merit has arisen as a result of this practice to all mother sentient beings. May all mother sentient beings have happiness in its causes. May they be free from suffering causes, and become Buddhas in one lifetime. Okay? That's how you dedicate the merit. There's a more formal way to do that, but mine is the fast track. So, okay, bye. I love all of you. Big hugs, please. Take care of yourselves. And first and foremost, cultivate patience at all times. Cultivate patience. Again and again, that's the path to happiness and freedom. Bye bye, guys.